Hey, listeners. Welcome to Straight Wife, Trans Life. I'm Lisa. For this episode, I'm going to share what it was like to tell our son that his father is transgender, the planning leading up to that moment, and how things are going now. But first, I want to begin by giving anyone in this situation 2 takeaways right up front, as these are important tidbits to keep in mind. First, how you and your spouse treat each other will impact your child. Kids pay attention, sometimes from the other room when you think they aren't listening. And second, kids really are resilient and curious. All right, let's dive in. One of the most terrifying moments in my life was sitting down with my spouse to tell our 8-year-old child that his father is transgender, what it means, and how our family will look moving forward. There was so much planning and worry that led up to that moment, and a lot of our fear was simply fear of the unknown. Will our child be okay? Will he lose a lot of friends? Will kids make fun of him? How do we prepare him for any mean comments? How do we make sure he continues to feel safe and loved? See, pretty terrifying. We waited 4 or 5 months after disclosure to tell our son. There was a lot of processing and figuring out how best to break the news. My spouse, working from home, would dress more feminine while our son was at school, something simple like feminine pants and a top, and change back to masculine clothes before our son came home. This was equally terrifying for her. I started trying to get ideas for how to tell our son by asking the various forums and groups I had joined how others with kids handled breaking this news. And you know what? Crickets! Crickets, I tell you. Not a single person responded anywhere. And to be fair, not everyone is glued to their groups, and some people have moved on. But I did feel deflated. I even deleted the question after a few days. By the way, this is one of the reasons I started this podcast. We need to help each other out. Luckily, my spouse and I have a wise couples therapist who gave us the best advice. She said, "Kids around 10 and under just want to be loved and feel safe. They want to know that you are there for them. Kids over 10 are in that age range where their friends' or peers' opinions start to matter more and hormones are taking off. So they will likely have a more difficult time adjusting to the changes. So you'll have to give them a little more time to sort through their emotions." Our next question was, what kind of techniques or examples could we use to tell our son? My spouse found a blog that suggested taking a box of M&Ms and a box of cookies and swapping the box covers or contents, whichever is easier, to make the point that it is only the outside that is different. Inside, the M&Ms or cookies that you love are still there. My spouse's therapist suggested showing our son the Muppet Babies episode where Gonzo wants to go to a ball in a dress, but is worried what his friends will think. We also found a list of book ideas, like The World Needs More Purple People, or It's Okay to Be Different, and Red, a crayon story. I'll add a list of books and other resources in the episode description. So, we went with showing our son the Muppet Babies episode Gonzarella. We'd never watched it, so we checked it out and felt it would be the best fit for our son. If your child or children like to read, maybe that's a better route for you. We all know how our children absorb information best. So, before this next step happened, we decided to tell some key people at our son's school about the transition. We thought, if this doesn't go well for our son, or he tells someone and they react in a way he wasn't expecting, we need to prepare the school if anything emotional arises. We contacted our son's teacher, the school principal, and the school counselor. We spoke on the phone or had a video call with each person to give them a heads up, and everyone said, "Thank you. We appreciate the heads up." We were assured that there was no tolerance for bullying of any kind and that he could visit the counselor as needed. No fanfare, all matter of fact, and that was that. All right, back to Gonzo and his dress. The day had arrived to tell our son, and we were both scared. We told our son we wanted to show him an episode of Muppet Babies that we could discuss afterward. He seemed a little confused and wasn't that interested, but he went along with it. After we watched it, my spouse explained why we watched it and that my spouse felt like Gonzo, except that it is permanent and that he feels like a she inside and needs to start living like a she all the time. I chimed in that it didn't change anything for us as a family, that the most important thing was that we are always supportive of one another, even if we don't understand it, and that his dad is just adding that spice to life that we didn't even know we needed. I thought I was so smart with that spice line. I really wanted to say that it was the twist ingredient they throw in on cooking shows, but that seemed a bit much. Our son's reaction was actually very sweet, to be honest. He had a "that's it" answer and didn't seem to care much. But then he turned around to my spouse, gave him a big hug, and said, "Good luck with your transvesticism." And we just thought, what? All this worrying and our kid is giving us the signal of, so what? This is not a big deal. And he didn't have any questions, and life continued as usual. Nothing new to see here. In the next days and weeks to follow, my spouse started to wear makeup around our son and more feminine clothing. At first, our son would ask, "Are you wearing makeup?" And sometimes he would ask in private, "Why is Popo," that's the name that our son calls him, "wearing this or doing that?" And it was never asked rudely or in a tone that sounded grossed out. Our son was genuinely curious and trying to figure this out. And my spouse and I made sure to keep responses matter of fact and positive. "Popo wears this because it makes her feel better." Or "Popo is doing this because she has felt like this her whole life and is now understanding why." And I continued to reiterate that we might look different now and things may be changing, but no matter what, we are a family and we support one another. Fast forward, our son is 9 now, almost 10, and this kid could still care less. He snuggles with his second mom, as he sometimes also calls her. He doesn't treat her any differently in public, and he even told me that at school someone made a "your mom" joke, and he responded by saying, "Which one? I have 2. He was pretty proud of that one. This kid honestly makes me look bad. He corrects me when I slip and say he, which is also known as misgendering. Although I just want to say, for the podcast, I will sometimes refer to he when I'm talking about the beginning stages of my spouse's transition. So I'm not trying to misgender her. All right, so my son just full on schooled me. This kid genuinely taught me a lesson. This is a story I share when people ask me how my son is handling it. And that is probably one of the most frequent questions I get. Is your son okay? So my son is chuckling to himself while we're sitting on the couch. And I ask him, "What are you laughing about?" He says, "Kittens." So I say, "Well, kittens are nice. Do you want a kitten?" He says, "Yes, but Popo is allergic." And thinking he wouldn't catch on, I say, "Well, there is a pill for that." And under my breath, I add a little, "What's one more pill?" And my son looks me in the eye and says, "Popo doesn't get penalized for being a woman." He used the word penalized on me. So our son loves his second mom fiercely, like he always has. He doesn't care what anyone thinks, and that's that, and it still is. And that is great that our son doesn't care, but that doesn't mean that it is the same for all kids. So if your child or children are having a difficult time, a counselor or therapist could be really helpful. There are also organizations that offer support and education for families of the LGBTQ plus community, like PFLAG at pflag.org and Collage colage.org, which brings together youth of parents who are gay, lesbian, transgender, or any part of the LGBTQ plus community to create a network of peers. So, all right, back to those takeaways that I mentioned at the beginning. The first, how you and your spouse treat each other will impact your child. If you don't make a big deal about this and treat each other nicely, your child or children should be fine. Talk to them, answer their questions, reassure them that you and your spouse support each other even if you decide it is best to live apart. Keep your kids away from any of the ugly bits or issues between you. And second, kids are resilient, curious, and open-minded if you stick to that united front. And if I'm wrong and this turns out to be really, really difficult for your child or children, consider a counselor or therapist, no matter their age, who can help your family through this transition, and look into finding a PFLAG chapter near you or contacting Colage, which is that organization for kids of parents in the LGBTQ plus community. All right, next episode will cover a kind of part 2 to this, telling other adults that your spouse or partner is transgender. Your friends, your acquaintances, the parents that your kids spend time with. We're going to dive into that one too. Until then, you got this.